Good evening, everybody. Happy almost the end of the month of 420. This is SOKy Nostalgia. Didn't like that. All right. Well, we teased it a little bit last week, and we're going to have a very awesome episode tonight where we're covering two bands of yesteryear. And I sound really old saying stupid crap like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Anyway.
We gave them just a tip last week.
That's right. That's right. We did. We gave them just a tiny taste of what we're going to get into this week. So let's quickly get through the beginning. And this is probably where everybody's going to start fast forwarding. But let's get through it. So this week, I am the Matt.
Sir Bradley. Tiny.
I am the walrus. Cuckoo, Kachoo.
A.K.A. Alan. That's right. We've got the four hosts with the most here, and if you would like to reach one of us, you can get us at SOKyNostalgia@gmail.com, DeadpanStudio18@gmail.com, as well as Deadpan-Studio.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter at SOKy Nostalgia and Deadpan Studio 18. Wow, those are original, aren't they? Because that's what I use for everything that has to do with this. So, if you would like to complain about us, send us an email. Deadpan-Studio.com, Deadpan-Studio18, one more time, SOKyNostalgia@gmail.com. I'm going to knock it into the wall as many times as I can, like a hammer to a nail. I'm a little touchy. Anyway, we're also streaming on a number of different areas. We've got iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, and Spotify, as well as our app, the app server website, deadpanstudio.podbean.com. Yeah. All right, so a little bit of news here. We've got a little bit of local news. Really local. Obviously, we've got our state of Kentucky has begun phase 1 of opening the state back up, hoping to break through the rest of this curve of the coronavirus. So good luck to everybody there. Sounds like the majority of everything will be open at a very diminished capacity by May 21st. So congratulations, Kentucky! You're ahead of everything. So,
I still haven't gotten my stimulus check, and I had a dream the other night that they started the second wave with $2,000, and I looked in my account one day, and I had $3,000 waiting on it.
Wow, it's a nice dream.
Dream a little dream, man.
And then I woke up and was like, "Huh,
I hate my life." I know.
Brad's going to start belting these out, and nothing's going to start coming across.
Who's Brad?
Sir Bradley.
Alan does that all the time, too. I don't know who the hell this Brad is.
Well,
we can work it out."
Well, it's his fault, really. He keeps saying that, so it kind of sticks in my head. So, hey, Sir Bradley, don't tick off Alan. You don't know who your enemy or your ally is going to be in tonight's episode.
Oh, he knows.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I know.
He knows.
So immediately, I'd said something about this off mic right before we started, but oh man, I thought we were so close to having our first, actual documented comments. Unfortunately, it turned out they were just spammers. I was dead set to make somebody a t-shirt. You see that, listeners? I was ready to give a spammer an email. Nobody wants to email us. Just say,
Just
email
a day in the
us.
life of man.
Yeah, just email us and say free t-shirt. Hey,
I mean, good Lord. The 8 of you email us.
Yeah, if you if you do that, I'll send a reply that says, I need your shirt size, if you're male or female, as well as what your address is, and I promise Sir Bradley will not have any of that.
I don't see the humor in that.
could possibly be a request that I hand deliver it?
That's what
Well,
she said.
depends on the hand, man. They might not want that.
Maybe they would.
Yeah, they might. They might. Okay, so let's amend that. Say free T-shirt with or without hand. National or international news. We have this month. I don't know if anybody noticed it, but we're recording on the 30th today, and this will come out next week, so we'll already be into May, I believe. But this past month marked the 34th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster, which took place on April 26th of 1986.
Wow, really? That doesn't seem...
No.
I'm sorry, I did not catch the anniversary of what?
The Chernobyl disaster.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, big meltdown. Nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
Big meltdown like most millennials and the generation after that have every single day.
And there goes half the audience.
We're down to 2.
That's okay. Send us your emails.
I'm gonna send insults until I get emails. So
yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna start getting harsher until we get some.
I'll turn all my attention away from the co-host all the way over to the audience only. All right, so that's pretty much all we have for the news, unless you all have anything you want to contribute to that.
I just kind of caught just a tad bit of a Joe Biden sexual harassment or sexual assault, something like that.
Yeah. Well, here's the funniest thing, though. Yes, he is being sought after about possibly being investigated for sexual harassment. Always, as always, innocent until proven guilty. However, here is one thing that he has done, which he is already proven because they've recorded him doing this. He had a town hall the other day where Hillary Clinton was endorsing him. In the midst of her endorsing him, he falls asleep live on camera.
Come on, man. The guy was like 100. Give him a break. He needed a nap. Give him a nap.
Well, everyone's like, is he asleep? Is he napping? And then all of a sudden he shoots awake like somebody woke him up. He's like, oh. And people wonder and have gotten all over, every other person that's made fun of him because they call him Sleepy Joe Biden. There's a reason why.
Maybe the man actually has narcolepsy. Who knows?
Yeah, but do we want him holding a World War III phone with narcolepsy? No, I don't.
I'm just saying.
Well,
at least he might pay attention.
God.
I don't want anybody that Hillary likes. Look, if she turned around and said, I don't like Donald Trump, then, that would probably sway that. Do you hear that, listeners? If you don't want Trump in office, just have Hillary write to her, have her endorse him instead. You want him out of office? That's how you do it. It'll make everybody's head explode.
We did not mean to upset the Clintons by any means. And if I go missing, you'll know why.
I'm sorry, Epstein did kill himself. I'm so sorry. I apologize. All right, that's enough gilding Lily. Let's go ahead and let's get into our main topic. You ready?
Let's spit on this thing.
All right, here we go.
Let's get ready to rumble!
That's right. Tonight we are going to have the Beatles versus the Stones. Who is the best band? Who is the most influential? Who just had it better? I know some of us...
I agree with Howard Stern.
Well, we can't even include his argument just because, well, I think he was playing to his, his guest. But...
What? No.
Yeah, no. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a one-on-one battle. I say one-on-one. It's actually... Well, Sir Bradley's been pretty obvious about who he's going to back in this fight. We're going to have the Beatles versus the Stones, so it could be 1-on-4, 2-on-2, 3-on-1. You just don't know. It's going to be a free-for-all. So, does everybody here have have their stuff in order to, kind of entice the audience. Of course,
can't be 1 on 4. There's only 4 of us.
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get the shit kicked out of me here.
I hope.
I'm pretty.
well, I don't know how actually, I do know which way I'm going to swing. However, there's some other things that I will say during it. So let's see here. Does everybody have their arguments ready for this?
I do. I would like to preface before we get into it too far that I'm not. My opinions are very strong on this because of certain things, and I am in no way, shape, form, or fashion belittling the other artist's career because let's be honest, they both have accomplished amazing things. But I do have a very strong opinion about artistry, and we can get into that later. But please do not take me defending one band as me not liking the other, because the other is fairly amazing as well.
I'm pretty sure that's going to be a universal between all of us. That even though we're going to make an argument, one over the other, it doesn't at all mean that that we dislike the other.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because I tell you what, before we get into the arguments, I'll personally say right now that the band that I chose is not my favorite of the two. It is not. I personally prefer the music of, one band over the other. That is not but that is not the reason why, I like that. I like that band is because, you know what I'm trying to say. I prefer one music over the other, but it's not the same one that I chose to say which one was the better.
Fair enough. I'm very interested to hear these opinions.
Yeah. Because I tell you what, I've got a playlist on my phone that has nothing but one band and none of the other. And the one that's none of the other is the one that I've chosen as the better band. So there you go.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So, if everybody's ready, here we go.
Adrian.
If I can change.
Everybody can change. Careful, they might copyright us for that.
I was going to say.
Yasim Yas. Yasim Yas.
How the hell did we get on Rocky 4?
The ding ding of the bell and Michael Buffer.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
I don't know who wants to go. Who wants to say something first? I can go ahead and tell you if you'd like, since Tiny, you were really interested to see which way I went for both of these reasons. Both these things.
We got Matt.
Matt, I think you ought to save yours for last.
Okay. Because I've got mine right here. I've got about 18 points for why this one band is better, and then the last one is just by sheer numbers. So, but that still doesn't mean I like them.
Matt or Mr. Allen first. That's just my preference.
All right, Mr. Allen, you go first.
All right, I'll go first.
Go for it, dude.
The Beatles.
And why?
Because they're the best.
And why?
Because I said so.
Your man.
Look, when you think of the British invasion, who is the first name to come to mind?
No.
Austin Powers.
Nope. When you think of the historical British invasion, who is the first name that comes to mind?
King George.
He said Liam. Really? Dude, get out of here right now. You don't even get an opinion anymore.
When you think of the musical British invasion of the 60s, what is the first name that comes to mind? Who inspired the name WrestleMania? Who is the main reason why... I've already forgotten his name again. Was it Ed Sullivan?
Ed Sullivan?
Is still getting brought up today, other than when David Letterman retired. Come on.
So, I would like, before we get very far...
Whose songs are in every other commercial?
again, I would like to go through a little history, if we could, before we get too far into this argument. The Beatles were formed in 1960. The Rolling Stones got together in 1962.
Correction.
So-
Beatles came together in 58.
Technically, yes,
Yeah.
but only as it was a different band. It wasn't.
Yeah, they
actually-
came up with the name in 60. Yeah, you're right. You're right about that.
And they didn't actually put out. They only did club scenes up till around 62. And that's when they put. And that's when they put their first album out. The Stones got together in 62, and they were repeatedly putting albums out. They both toured America as part of the British invasion in 1964. So to say that they were both popular enough by the time that came around is fair enough. However, I don't ever recall seeing anything about the Stones touring like stadiums at that point. And the Beatles were selling out stadiums in America.
Well, the only mention, you watch documentaries on that time period, immediately it's the Beatles, and then you go, oh, and then there were the Rolling Stones. So, if we're going from that standpoint, that's how it's looked at.
But who was more fun to party with?
I'm gonna say the Beatles.
I have no idea because
think,
Paul McCartney
in
has
1965
mentioned
and hasn't stopped yet.
the drugs that he used to take. So, I mean, just because out in the public eye they were bubblegum and cool, sarcastic, it doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of partying going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, Sir Bradley made a really good point, though. I don't think it came across. Say that one more time, bud.
I said I think Keith Richards started partying in 1965 and hasn't stopped yet.
Oh yeah, there's a reason he is still alive. He has basically preserved all his organs. So
That's because he left his soul in 1965.
it's because he sleeps upside down.
It's your soul, Keith. It's your soul.
I learned that from Keith Richards while touring with the Stones. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
So yeah, Alan, if you want to continue on with your standpoint there.
Oh no, I'll chime in every once in a while.
Okay. Tiny, you want to go next? Since Sir Bradley was like, well, he wants either Alan or me to go. Well, Alan just went. How about you go, and then I'll chime in.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Sir Bradley knows where I stand on this point, but
but it's not about who you pick; it's about why.
I have to give the crown to the Beatles, basically based on two things. So you're going to tell me about numbers later. I'm assuming about number of albums sold, things of that nature.
100%.
The reason, and this is the sole reason, of course there are others, but the sole reason that I base my decision on the Beatles, like I said, you want to go, even if you go 58, right? So 12 years. The Beatles were the Beatles from basically 62 to 1970. They put out 13 studio albums in 8 years. And I could not think of another band that has more number one hits in an 8-year period than them.
And stopped.
You think about their entire catalog of music.
Yep.
It all come out in 8 years, from 62 to 70.
But
it's amazing.
Doesn't it sort of seem like because of that, they were sort of like, the guy and the girl that meet on a first date, they go ahead and sleep together, then everything's just ruined. Whereas the Stones, they wined and dined and created a relationship, and it blossomed over time. Made it meaningful.
So okay,
yeah.
Let me take that argument for you, Matt, because I had planned on bringing this up a little later. Given the longevity of a career, you're going to get something that somebody likes eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
let me bring in another band who I think is really amazing, and you know that they're one of my favorite bands because we've seen them in concert together. Aerosmith. Aerosmith has been around almost in the same time frame, right? They were late 60s, early 70s coming out of Boston.
Yep. Yep.
Do you know how many number one songs they've had in their entire career?
One.
And
it wasn't even their song.
and it came from a soundtrack to a movie. Yes, thank you. So, given the fact that the Stones have had the time to go through and refine and work together and know each other, they've got to put some music out there that everybody likes. But it's very, very difficult for me in daily conversation to find somebody who, A, doesn't know who the Beatles are in an 8-year career, or doesn't know at least one of their songs, if not from them, from a cover that somebody did.
With that argument, though, you can also safely say there's not one person on this planet who's never heard of the Rolling Stones.
That's very true. But
and 1,000 years from now, and 1,000 years from now, when we're all long gone, people are still going to be getting stories, from Keith Richards himself. So,
right, true story.
Oh man, if he dies this year, I'm just gonna blow the planet.
Yep, you're done, man. You're done. So, from a numbers perspective, I tend to take that as what I was saying is I basically tend to take that as skewed. Because the longer your name is out there, the more product that you put out, obviously.
And the more you're going to sell.
Yes. So that's really my argument against that. Yeah. The second argument that I have is the Beatles stopped touring in 1965. From 1965 to 1970, they recorded 8 albums, never toured, and they were probably their most popular albums to ever come out. You're talking about Abbey Road, the White Album, Sgt. Pepper. And they never toured to promote these albums. They never went out and performed to promote these albums.
That's because they were too high to stand on stage for very long.
Whatever the reason may be, and I don't disagree with it. Because,
Excellent point, Matt.
It is what it is. But tell me right now, do you know a band that could come out today and produce the White Album?
Still there, Tiny?
Sabotage. He has been sabotaged.
He's been sabotaged. Hit pause.
Wait,
there you are. There you are.
Oh, well, apparently my phone went to sleep while I was ranting. I'm sorry.
I know a band that could do that today.
Who?
Don't act like you don't know who I'm going to say.
I think Sir Bradley's talked about the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, you know why? Because they've been around for 70 years. Everybody knows who they are. I'm just saying, if you look, and this is what kills me, and this is the whole thing about it. The Beatles didn't get the opportunity for the longevity, right? They dismantled their entire actual band, like contractually, in 1970. Okay,
I'd say they were all fighting over Yoko.
But even if you look at, okay, they dismantled the band in 70. They might have been able to get a reunion together 74, 75, start making new music again, right?
Yeah.
It's a possibility. We don't know. That realm of possibility was taken away when John Lennon was murdered. So we have no idea what they would be today if they were here. So it's really hard to argue about a band that put out as much product and good product in 8 years as a band that put out product for 6.
Well,
you're
that's
talking
a very, very good point. With the short amount of time that the Beatles were the Beatles, people know. I know more Beatles songs than I do Rolling Stone songs.
And in the time frame, because
I bet I do.
You just don't realize what they are.
No, I know the Rolling Stones songs that I do know. I know what they are.
Wild Horses, Paint It Black, Can't Get No Satisfaction, Brown Sugar.
Wait. I appreciate you naming those songs, and I'm pretty sure that there are probably 20 more that I can name.
Yeah.
Just from knowing the Rolling Stones, and I really do enjoy the Stones music.
Yeah.
But tell me how many of those songs came out from 1962 to 1970?
The ones that I mentioned, except for Wild Horses. I think Wild Horses came out in 73, but between 60 and 72, all the ones that I mentioned came out in that time period.
So, okay, so do you have the numbers on what they sold?
Yes, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that at the end after we get our arguments.
Okay.
Because this is
right.
This is actually what I have. This is what my argument is for about why one was actually better than the other. I do have some points to go over, but Sir Bradley, would you like to go?
Okay, so I don't exactly have a lot of facts. There's a reason why I don't have a lot of facts, and that is, frankly, I enjoy both of these bands.
Hear, hear.
A lot. A lot. But both of these bands are nowhere near my top list of people that I like to listen to, or bands that I like to listen to. So frankly, I just don't care that much. And I'm not saying I'm not trying to be an asshole or anything like that. I don't care. But now I do have a preference. Now, obviously, if we were talking about something else that was a little bit more of, something that I'm passionate about, then I'm going to come up with a lot more facts and things like that. But I just enjoy the Stones music more so than I do the Beatles. I know that there's a ton of Beatles songs out there that are great. There's a ton of Stones songs out there that I think are great. But honestly, neither one are just, really, really, really do it for me, But I will say this. Now, I didn't take the time to look up a lot of information. I figured you would have a lot of that, Matt, Tiny. I figured you'd have a lot of that, too.
Yep.
But just as a generalization, I feel like that the Beatles that the Stones made better music. And yeah, there is a longevity argument, that you can make, and obviously, Tiny, you have.
Well, that's not really fair, though, because of the, two of the members of the Beatles are dead.
Exactly.
So we can't really have that argument, I guess, unless you're Mick Jagger making that argument too.
And that's another thing too. Individually, as solo artists, they were just as big as they were when. I mean, as far as their music is concerned, they were just as good as they were collectively as the Beatles.
Yeah, that is too. That's correct. But
everybody except Ringo.
What I would like to focus on is actually the fact that this is Beatles versus Stones, not Beatles versus Stones versus Lennon versus McCartney versus Harrison.
And that is why the Beatles broke up.
I'm proud of you, Sir Bradley. You knew 3 of the 4 members.
Yeah, and that's very true. That's very true, because if we were going by, individually, Imagine just blows away Dancing in the Street.
I would agree. I mean, Lennon has my favorite song ever.
But that's not really fair. You're naming a really big, huge, life-changing song versus one that Mick Jagger made on his own to piss off Keith. So,
okay. Here you go. How do you sleep? Blew away Dancing in the Street.
But I wanted you to finish, Tiny. I wanted you to get your argument out there about the longevity right? That the Beatles weren't around that long, and they put out, what'd you say, 13 albums in,
13
8
albums in 10 years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
13 albums in 10 years?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a comparison to something that's totally off topic, and I know Alan probably would understand this. But you've seen products out there before that just, it's so much. It's just over the top, and it's a little bit of an oversaturation. I mean, if they didn't have to tour for 5 years and they created 8 albums, I think that's much. They didn't have to do anything. Everybody else done it for them. They got all the publicity without doing anything themselves.
That is a very good point, Brad.
Yeah, all they had to do was put pen to paper and make the music and put it out there. They didn't have to worry about it.
In my humble opinion, they were placed on a godlike pedestal. And after that, there was no touching them.
But I don't disagree with you, Sir Brad. Not in the least. And to be honest, that is an argument that I didn't even think of at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But you did make a good point. What I will counter that with is they put out enough music that everybody liked to be able to do that. And
yeah, the material was still top notch.
Does anybody actually know why they stopped touring? Because I do.
I do too. Yeah, they basically stopped touring not too long after they sold out whatever the Mets field was in New York at the time. I can't think of it.
I thought it was San Francisco. I thought it was San
Well, no. The big one that they did was in New York, and the reason that they decided to stop after that was they basically played with whatever their setup was, and at the time the technology was not great, right? So they were basically playing through a PA system. Ringo couldn't even hear the other three playing. And then they had to immediately leave the stage and get in the back of the van.
Nope. I think you cut out again.
But Brad, as far as the actual dates go, you were correct. New York City, Shea Stadium, August 23rd, 1966. And then Candlestick Park, San Francisco, August 29th, 1960. I'm leaving out two other shows, but yeah, New York, and then 2 other cities, which are Seattle and LA, and then San Francisco was the final one. But I think what his point was Shea Stadium was so crazy that they didn't have.
Yeah, they were just
I think the spirit of John Lennon doesn't want you to finish that, Mick.
Right, and then in Seattle, which was 2 days after the New York City show, they actually had 2 shows in Seattle.
Yep, he dropped out. There he is. Are you back?
Yeah, he's back.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what the hell's going on.
It's the rain.
What kind of phone are you using?
So funny.
Well, here's a piece of trivia. That was part of it. That was a big portion of it. But actually, this was actually confirmed by both Ringo and Paul that the main reason they decided that they stopped touring was because they were flat out exhausted. They had been touring constantly, even when they were writing, constantly touring for the majority of that decade.
Yeah, they were getting burnt out.
If you ever have watched, if anybody's ever watched That Thing You Do, I know a lot of us here have, but I'm talking about the listeners. If any of you have ever seen That Thing You Do, the way they're constantly making them go, 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 just like that, it's not as bad today like that because some things are just more spread out. And you can fly and you get a little bit more of a break in between. But back then, you were just riding around in cars and buses all the time. And yeah, you got a plane every now and then. But most record companies just kind of, bust you around. So if you imagine, they're touring over here in the U.S. and the U.K. and everything. And they're just constantly going and going for the better part of a decade and writing music. They are exhausted. And then Not to mention, when you're in close quarters like that for a better part of a decade, if you're not actually family, but you're a group that comes together like a family, no matter what, you're gonna butt heads. So then that led to them stop touring. Okay, let's just try recording in the studio. They did that until tempers just overrode everything. Like I said, that was confirmed by both Paul and Ringo in an interview they did on Good Morning America back in It wasn't long after George Harrison's death. I can't remember exactly what year that was, but it wasn't long after George Harrison's death. So.
I think he died in late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
He was doing some Traveling Wilbury stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe you're right about that.
Well, I am right about that because I'm a Tom Petty aficionado.
Right. Yeah.
Are you talking about George Harrison?
Do what?
Are you talking about George Harrison?
Yeah, George Harrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, he died in 01.
Oh, one.
Yeah.
Okay. No, he was doing stuff in the late 80s, early 90s with the Traveling Wilburys.
Yeah.
I kind of it's something that I kind of got took off of. Alan, I brought you up because I know that you're a wrestling fan. And when I brought up the oversaturation, I know that you can maybe see what I'm trying to say here. But, if you got a wrestler or a program or whatever that they're trying to get across to the audience, and you just get the same thing over and over again, or you get something that's just constantly in your face or something that's just pushed down your throat, it feels like an oversaturation, and it just kind of turns you away from it.
Sounds like marriage.
Talk about that. But that's what the Beatles have felt like to me. Now I feel this way for both bands. I feel that they are not just musicians, but they're
iconic and life changing and culture and changing. They can cause change in culture. Yeah, I get you.
Well, when you say oversaturation, Paul McCartney's. Recently there was for those listening who don't know, this little friendly rivalry has been going on since the invasion happened. Yeah. Pretty much. So Paul McCartney goes on Howard Stern, and Howard, I guess, like, I don't know which one. I think Matt said it, talking up his guest. Yeah. He basically said, he's adamant about his preference, which is the Beatles. And basically he was just trying to get Paul to talk. So when you talk about oversaturation, I think Paul's response to Howard was about the same thing, just in a different way. Because he said, the Stones are a fantastic group. He got to see them every time that they play out, because he has to see them every time they play out because they're a great band. He said, but they're rooted in the blues, and when they're writing, it's always to do with the blues. Whereas the Beatles had a little bit more influence, or influences, and there's a lot of differences. He loves the Stones, but he's with Howard. The Beatles were better. So what Paul was saying was, with the Stones, you always got the exact same. Of course, their songs are different as far as the way they sound, or not come together, but you know what I'm saying. So what Paul was saying was, Rolling Stones are mainly rooted in the blues. Mm-hmm. So anything you're going to get out of them is blues oriented. Whereas the Beatles, they could go from "I Want to Hold Your Hand" to "Come Together." It's not always the exact same thing. So, which is also a good thing for the Stones, because their fans can say they never changed, like AC/DC. But
true that.
With Paul McCartney and John, all those guys, they always wanted to switch it up, because they were artists. Not saying that the Stones aren't, because they definitely are, but they had different things to say. They didn't stick with the same format.
So I would like to, if I could, just touch base on that point. So after they had decided to stop touring, and they went back into studio to record their next album, they basically came up with the Sgt. Pepper album because they sat down and said, "We're tired of being the Beatles. Let's make ourselves an entirely different band, an entirely different name, and an entirely different sound." And I think that's one of the things you have to do as an artist. You have to be willing to grow and experiment. And while the Stones did, and as you grow, it obviously happens. But you're talking about the Stones probably took 15 years to do so, where the Beatles did it in 5. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of like my argument for Pink Floyd versus music today. And I know this is a little bit off topic, but music today is all electronic, right? You go into a studio and you record to a hard drive, and then you can take any kind of software you want and do anything you want with the music that you have put on this digital medium. Pink Floyd didn't have that option. Pink Floyd had to go into the studio and they had to use different things, and they had to actually tape together pieces of tape off of a 4-track or an 8-track recorder to make the sounds and to make the music that they made. There was an artistry to it. There's a reason that they used to be called artists. And I use the term artist versus musician very, very differently today, because today's musicians, I don't feel are artists.
I would agree with you there. I think they're entertainers.
Yeah, that's it exactly. There's a difference between being an entertainer and being an artist. And it's my big argument with pop music today, because literally you're not trying to sell an album. Like back in the 60s and 70s, you were trying to sell somebody to go buy a vinyl record that had maybe 6 to 7 songs per side. And all the songs had to be good, because they're not going to put this record on just to listen to one song. Today, all you have to do is write a hook and sell it on iTunes for 99 cents a piece. It's not the same.
Right.
So I feel as far as artistry goes, I feel the Beatles were better in that sense than the Stones were. Not that they were necessarily better, but I feel like they were more focused than what the Stones were doing.
And well, as for the Beatles, in 1964, George Harrison introduced the electric 12-string guitar into mainstream pop. So everybody wants to talk about Bob Dylan went electric, and Bob Dylan, if I'm not mistaken, that is the same year that he was introduced, or the Beatles, where he met the Beatles. They finally were introduced to one another. And Bob Dylan, my goodness, I mean, that name alone speaks for itself. So, there's video footage of John Lennon riding in the back of a vehicle with Bob Dylan. Just the musical. I don't even know what I'm trying to say right now. Like those guys. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not that big of a Rolling Stones fan, where I don't know their history. But I'm a big Dylan fan. I'm a big Beatles fan, and knowing that they were so close after they met, and they clicked so well, it's just like, I don't know. That's just the artistry of it. I can't get it out of my head.
Go ahead.
You were talking about, I'm sorry to cut whoever I cut off.
Oh no, you're fine. Go ahead, man.
The exact argument that you made for the Beatles being, artists, is exactly the same things that I would say as them not being artistic. To me, I really enjoyed a lot of their poppy stuff. All right, when they first started to come out.
Right.
But the stuff that I didn't like so much is the stuff that was just psychedelic kind of stuff. And to me, it felt like it was not music. It was not from an artist. It was craziness from drugs.
Well, yeah, that's the time period. But I mean, it wasn't all about that. Like you got Yellow Submarine.
Well, no, I mean it's not like it was all about drugs. I mean it was about love. No matter how you cut it with the Beatles, it was nothing but about love.
But I think what Brad was really getting at though was how it sounded.
Yeah, because
okay.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Sgt.
Which
Pepper,
I do agree with, because I don't like. But I mean, I don't like it. But when you with the lyrics and stuff, I tune that stuff out that I don't like, and I focus on what I do like about it, I guess. But yeah, I do agree.
So let me step out on a limb here, and I'm going to piss a lot of Beatles fans off right now. So please send me an email. One of my least favorite songs from the Beatles is Eleanor Rigby.
Is what?
Is it a great Eleanor Rigby?
Okay.
Is it a good song? Yes. Is it lyrically done well? Yes. I don't like the sound. I don't like the speed of the song. So when I'm arguing for the Beatles, I don't like all their stuff. I don't think all their stuff is great.
Right.
But where I'm coming from is there are enough people that dug it for that time period and beyond that time period. But to counter that, what I will say is one of my favorite Rolling Stone songs is Faraway Odd. And that song was beyond storytelling. It just was, and that's why it's one of my favorites. I think that they put a lot of thought into that. I think there was an actual story. I haven't done the research on it, but I think there was an actual story, probably from one of the band members, that caused that song to be written. But yeah, that's probably one of my all-time top favorite Stone songs. And I don't know that a lot of people know it, but it's definitely one of my favorites.
So my research for this show consisted of, I put Spotify on the Beatles playlist for 2 hours, listen to it. I put it on for 2 hours on the Stones, listen to it. And to me, the sound quality that was produced by the Stones was a lot better.
I completely agree. And, honestly, that's actually really good research, because I didn't listen to any of that music to prepare for this evening. I figured, everyone would want to talk about, the music and the styles and all that stuff, which, I would cover. But, me, I always get a little more analytical. I like the trivia. I like the history behind everything. So the fact that you did that, I'm gonna give you a big old bravo to that, Sir Bradley. No joke. That was really good. Good job for you, man. Where's it at? Where's that sound at? There it is. I changed the color of my soundboard and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I mean, I do it anyway, but today and yesterday, I had my Sirius XM tuned to the Beatles station. Yeah. I mean, if the Rolling Stones had the Sirius XM channel, I would have done the same, but they don't. So,
that's because the Beatles can't get rich off of it like the Stones can.
Well, I don't know. Garth Brooks has his own.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Sir Bradley, I would like to say that if I were to do the same thing that you did, I'm not sure that I could, if I didn't have such strong feelings about other things with the Beatles, I don't know that I could actually listen to 2 hours of the Beatles and 2 hours of the Stones and say I like this man better than. I don't know that that's possible for me to say. Yeah. Especially coming in if neither one of the bands were your favorite, and I have a very special place for the Beatles in my heart, just because of the time frame that I discovered them and what their music meant to me when I heard it.
To be honest, I understand that 2 hours for each band is not enough.
I mean, yeah, you might have been able, and let's be honest, between the two of them, you might have been able to cover all of their number ones, maybe, in 2 hours for each band.
But the thing of it was, their Spotify channel or playlist and just hit random. So I didn't search any particular song that the Beatles that I liked or the Stones that I liked. It was just at random.
Yeah, both those bands have an immense catalog of music. I mean, even stuff that's getting released later and later and later that they find, like especially with the Beatles.
And that I want to bring up the fact that Alan, I know that Alan thought that I was going to choose the Beatles, and
I did originally.
Yeah. Why did you think that, Alan?
Because of Oasis.
Because of Oasis, yeah. Because Oasis has been called the Beatles 2.0, which I disagree with. I mean, I see a little bit of similarities, but
they came out with the same haircuts.
Well, I mean, and I was telling Brad earlier today on the phone. That's why one of my cousins cannot stand, and I've tried. I have tried to get him to open up to Oasis songs because I think they're great.
Mm-hmm.
But he absolutely cannot get past the fact that he believes that they ripped off the Beatles. And I'm like, dude, it's not a rip-off. It's more paying homage because they are different bands. But
yeah, if you want to talk about bands that are ripping off, that'd be another episode because I tell you what, there's a ton of them out there, especially in the heavy metal genre. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, with Oasis, though, the main things were Start a Revolution from My Bed, and that goes to John and Yoko doing their thing.
We brought up also the intro to Don't Look Back in Anger sounds a lot like Imagine.
Right, and the rose-colored glasses, as Matt or Tiny said, the haircuts. But anyway, yeah, I mean that's another thing too. Like, I can't think of another band to emulate the Stones the way that Oasis seems to emulate the Beatles to certain people. So there's another similarity difference there.
I think
argument where the Beatles got put up on such a pedestal that they are God. Nothing is going to knock them off that pedestal. That's my so.
Well, John was being sarcastic when he said that.
And very good stuff. But let's be honest. Both of them were extremely influential on a lot of not only British bands, but a lot of American bands as well.
Yeah, I mean, just think of it this way: that both bands broke boundaries and steered culture in new directions. Both of them, I mean, if you want to talk about style-wise and the music that they covered, I mean, yeah, the Stones stole from Chuck Berry, so did the Beatles. The Stones and the Beatles both perfected the art of rock and roll in the mid-60s.
Well, in my opinion, everybody in rock and roll stole from Chuck Berry.
Yeah. Both dabbled in psychedelic music. But here's where they differ. Here's mine. Now, I'm going to start out by saying, who do I personally would love more than the other? I love the Stones a whole lot more than I do the Beatles. Music-wise, I mean, if you put a gun to my head and said you get to listen to one song from either band for the rest of your life, I'll say Stones quicker than anything.
What would the song be?
Wild Horses.
Oh, dude.
That thing hits me in a way that most music. I've got a favorite song of all time, but outside of that song hits me in such a place inside me that I don't think another song has actually been able to do.
Matt, I would like for you to give yourself a round of applause just for being on the right team.
Well, let's hold that. Because that is not my argument for which band is better. The Beatles are better, and I have reasons why.
You son of a bitch. He threw me a curveball.
I said from the beginning, just because I prefer one over the other has no bearing on which one I actually feel is a better band than the other.
I-
You did.
I'm very interested to hear your argument, man, because I know you were talking about numbers earlier.
Yes. Okay. So check this out. Okay, yeah, somebody mentioned earlier that the Stones were rooted purely in blues. 100% they were. That was their influence, was blues music. The Beatles they had different genres of music as their influence. Elvis, Carl Perkins, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers, all them kind of helped shape their sound in the very beginning. So you're looking at different genres of music immediately with all of them. You've got rockabilly,
Right.
rock, pop. You've got some country music in there. You've got gospel, all rolled into one with the Beatles. You've also got, okay, the things that I just mentioned that both bands did, covering Chuck Berry, perfecting the art of rock and roll, dabbled in psychedelic music. Yes, they both did that, but the Beatles did them first, with the Stones doing that shortly afterward.
I'll tell you, man, you talk about pop. Hey, Paul McCartney had one hell of a scream on him.
He sure did. Did you know that the Beatles actually wrote an original single for the Stones in 1963?
Which one?
I wanna be your man. It was given to them a day when the Stones were visiting the Beatles in a studio. So one of their first hits was written by the Beatles. Did you know that if it wasn't for the Beatles, that the Stones wouldn't even have a record deal?
That don't mean nothing.
Yeah.
George Harrison recommended that the Stones be signed by Decca Records. So if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't have gotten their first deal. The Beatles actually, I will say that the Beatles actually did invite Brian Jones, who was one of the original members of the Rolling Stones, in to play saxophone on their song "You Know My Name," but it was their song. They also had Mick Jagger come in and provide backing vocals for "Baby You're a Rich Man." Also, it is the Beatles song. The Beatles never actually got to the point in their career where they made albums as, I guess you could say, pointless as "Bridges to Babylon."
This is why we're friends.
The Beatles compressed dozens of amazing songs into their 6-7 year progression, from teeny boppers to psychedelics. They were among the first rock band to use the studio as an instrument and set a new standard for songwriting. They, of course, yes, both bands did break up, but the big differences is that members died. But Lennon and McCartney were rumored to have had conversations of bringing the band back together before Lennon was murdered.
And that's I mean, it's from a music standpoint, that's what's so sad about it.
Yeah.
Is what could have been.
Yeah. So, here's the numbers. Here is where the analytics come in to support the argument, because no matter what I've just said, it can still be, you can still say, oh, that's biased, or that's subjective. This is objective. These are the numbers.
Diarrhea. That's all I heard.
Diarrhea. Oh, by the way, little piece of trivia. Rolling Stones and Rolling Stone magazine. For those that don't know, the Rolling Stones nor the magazine were named after the other. Both of them were named after the song "Rolling Stone," written by Muddy Waters, who I mentioned I mentioned Muddy Waters in the interview we did with Steve Jewell as somebody that I really like. So anyway. During the week of April 4th, 1964, the Beatles occupied the top 5 position on the Billboard Hot 100. 5 positions. 5 of their own music occupied the same day. Top 2 positions of the albums chart, top 2. And the number 1 position of the British singles chart, the first 2 positions of the British albums chart, and the number 1 position on the British EP chart. Let's see. That's pretty much. You're lucky to have a top 10 album and single at the same time. That's what they did.
Yeah.
They have the most number 1 albums in the British album charts. Most number 1 hits. According, now this one's actually, I'm citing from the United World Chart. The Beatles have 16 of the out of 100 of the most successful tracks of all time, and 7 of the 100 most successful albums in history. Keith Richards, in his autobiography, even admits, look, here's the difference. Why they've had such a blistering success in their short amount of time than we did. They have 4 singers. We had 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you mentioned the Rolling Stone magazine. As a matter of fact, the former Rolling Stone associate editor, Robert Greenfield, compared the Beatles to Picasso.
Yeah.
He said that they were artists who broke through the constraints of their time period to come up with something that was unique and original.
Mm-hmm.
In the form of popular music, no one will ever be more revolutionary, more creative, and more distinctive.
They are commonly regarded as the foremost and most influential band in popular music history. But here, see, even up to that point, I can shovel it off to be like, I don't care, I prefer the Stones. This last one here, you were talking about longevity. Yeah, even Mick Jagger's talking about longevity. Okay, so you've got the Stones forming in 62, the Beatles forming in 60. Okay? The Rolling Stones have recorded 29 studio albums, 13 live albums, and 120 singles. That equals out to them selling 240 million albums over the course of their 60-plus career now.
Yeah, right at least 60.
The
Right
Beatles, with only 13 albums and 22 singles, have sold 600 million albums as of today. That, my friends, is the only way that I can definitively say that the Beatles were a better band than the Rolling Stones, was by that. 240 is a lot less than 600 million. Yeah, 240 million is a lot less than 600 million. But their music, to me, is still not as good as Rolling Stones.
Hey, I thought this was a best band, not who sold the most.
That means best band.
I
That's why Michael Jackson was able to, he was able to keep himself out of prison for so long, was because of Beatle money.
I would, if I could just interject one thing really quickly. If you want to talk about longevity and things of that nature, it would be hard pressed for me to say that if Jim Morrison hadn't died, that the Doors may be today a bigger influential band than the Rolling Stones. I don't think they would have been bigger than the Beatles.
Oh, well, and that's another thing. We were talking about, band members dying around the time that there were some types of talks of possibly maybe getting back together. Now, that number that you just gave, Matt.
Yeah.
Imagine what that would have, no pun intended, imagine what that would have been had Lennon not have been assassinated.
Unfortunately, we can only speculate on that.
I know.
However, I think we've pretty much run this subject into the ground. What we always say is that it doesn't matter what we say. Audience, let us know what you think. Send us an email. Let us know. Send us a tweet. Get us on Facebook. Let us know.
I just thought about something, and that might be another reason why I love them so much. I wasn't even alive when the Beatles were going, but when Lennon was shot. I wasn't even born yet. Oh, what was it? December of 1980?
He was shot was it 81?
80. December 1980.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was born in 91.
Well, none of us were born.
So, I don't know. Maybe it's I know. Well, for one, I know it's the music. I love their music. And I love their attitude. That there's video of them together with a reporter saying, "When are you going to get a haircut?" And Ringo or somebody said, "I got one this morning."
Yeah, exactly.
And then John himself in A Hard Day's Night, just that sarcastic. And I mean, when he went to trial because they were trying to kick him out of the country because they thought he was too loudmouth. The words he said to the reporter when asked about it, he said, "Time wounds all heals." And smiled about it. He didn't he didn't believe in the whole security thing, which could be argued that's why he got shot, is because he had too much faith. He had too much faith in people. I mean, there was a video documentary, I think it was called Imagine, where there's a homeless dude living on the man's lawn because he didn't have a gate, and he finally was like, "What is this dude doing?" So he talks to him. The guy thought that John would write songs about him, which I'm sure Mick Jagger and Rolling Stones have ran into in their lifetime. And then John tried to explain to him, "Look, I write about what I know. You know, I don't know you. How could that be? Are you hungry? Come in." So, and then he fed him at his table. I mean, a dude like that, I don't know, man. I'm just drawn to it. Their music, whether it's you call it bubblegum, which they were.
They were very much.
But they also had a lot of meaning and a lot of heart. And I dig the Stones sound. But like I said earlier, I just know more Beatles than I do Stones, and I care about the message that they had more than I do the Stones.
Well, I tell you what, between the both of them, I think the Stones would have been more fun because, yeah, I'm sure the Beatles had groupies, but you tell me any story that begins with the Rolling Stones, their groupies, and a swordfish. Game over. And
Matt, I would like you to take back that applause that I asked to give yourself earlier.
But and I will say this to that, Matt.
Yeah.
When you think of John Lennon.
Oh wait, he was already with the swordfish. Hey, Yoko.
When you think of John Lennon, what do you think of?
John Lennon?
Yeah.
Yoko.
No, I mean John Lennon himself. What do you think of?
Yoko.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I'm being serious.
What do I think about John?
Think of John Lennon.
I had two things. One, I think of him performing on the rooftop of what was it, the Apple Building?
Yep.
Him sitting there singing "Not Let It Be." God, what is the name of that song? Oh my gosh, they did a round of it. What was the name of that stinking song? Oh my gosh.
I guess it's not.
Are you talking about Give
remember?
Is what?
Be very memorable.
Oh no! Don't let me down. Don't
Let
me
Me Down. Yeah.
Was
okay, when you think of John Lennon, what do you think of? Tiny.
Me?
Yeah.
When I think of John Lennon, I really think of "I'm the Walrus." It's the one that sticks out to me the most.
Brad? Oh, no, not necessarily just his music. Like just him.
Oh, I can't wait to answer.
Go ahead, Sir Bradley.
Maybe this will hit a little closer to home with Alan. But when I think of John Lennon now I wouldn't think that, a year ago I wouldn't think this, but whenever I think John Lennon now, I think actually of our good friend Paul. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Okay. Now, collectively, I think we could all say at the same time, what do we think of when we think of Keith Richards? He's still alive? Oh, my God.
He's about 100 years old?
All the drugs that he took. Like, he's a great guitarist, but that's always the first thing to pop in your mind. Keith Richards is still alive? All those drugs?
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, come on, there's no comparison.
I would like to interject that I do think that John Lennon was the best musician out of all these guys.
Oh, yeah.
That we're talking about. And I don't exactly look at the Stones as exactly like art, really artistic or anything. It's just I like their sound a lot better.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, I do think Lennon was probably the best musician out of all these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say this in closing, and of course we've talked about a lot of this already. If you were to ask me my top 5 Rolling Stone songs, I can probably spout you my top 5 Rolling Stone songs. If you were to ask me my top 5 Beatles songs, we would probably be in a 2-hour discussion about why I could pick 5. And that's the difference for me. I can take the Stones and say, these are my top songs from them. I cannot take the Beatles and say, these are my top Stones songs from them. So that's really, if I had to put it in a nutshell, that's really where my opinion.
I am exactly in the same. I feel the same way about Tom Petty and Oasis both. So
Right. So
well, I can tell you my favorite.
And what
After that, it's wide open.
and what's so great about this is like Brad said earlier, I don't care. I mean, it really is what's so great about it because it's all subjective.
it very much is, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
you guys are not right.
I know we
You know-
touched on it a little bit during the local stuff that we did a couple of weeks ago, but even with our listeners, they're all going to have their own opinion, and the reason they're going to have their own opinion is because of how they felt. For me, I know exactly how I felt the first time I heard a Beatles song. And I remember where I was and what I was doing and how it affected me and why I wanted to go look for more of their music. I can't say the same for Rolling Stone because I think the first Rolling Stone song that I may have heard is Satisfaction, and it was very, I won't say middle of the road, but it didn't affect me the same way that the Beatles did. And I know that I'm biased on that because of the feeling that I had from the music, and that's very personal. It's not
yeah. I mean,
anything
I'm
factual.
I agree. Like, I love how the Rolling Stones sound. When I hear certain songs that I know are them, I won't turn it because it sounds so good. But I don't feel anything from it.
Black, Give Me Shelter.
The only
Yeah.
song that I have
Dude.
ever felt anything from the Rolling Stones is probably "Give Me Shelter," but it's only because of the structure of everything. Like, whoa, children! Like that ain't even Mick singing that part.
Right.
So I mean, you know, that's just my feelings on it.
Well, tonight, knowing that you guys didn't win,
I'll take refuge. I'll take refuge in that the belt is still mine.
They sound better, but there's no feeling in it to me.
Well, I guess we can still say that no matter what, our opinions are very subjective. I'm still sticking with my numbers. Personally, Stones are better, but by numbers in the world, the Beatles are better. So let's bring this topic to a close because we can just keep going and going and going for a good while.
Oh yeah,
better
like I
self-
said, we can. Hey, PR is part of the game, my man.
That's right.
Yeah, can't do any PR for
And it's really not fair because Brad said 2 hours for the Beatles, 2 hours for the Stones. I don't know that much about the Stones to be fair.
Let's
going off of what before you leave, because I think the whole reason why this episode came up is because of the Jagger and McCartney thing. Mick's response to that, to Paul saying that they were better, was that they're still around, and that's just not. If that's his reasoning for his band being better, he doesn't have a reason.
Well, I think he was being a little more reactive to tongue-in-cheek, a little more reactive to what Paul said,
friends.
because what Paul
They're
said
buddies.
first.
Mick Jagger put them in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, and and I know people are, there's actually we mentioned it, the rumor that they were kind of had a rivalry. They never did. They were actually friends, and all parties have always acknowledged it. So
yeah, it was a media rivalry.
Yeah, it was, and here's the thing, they actually had a deal to where whenever one band released something, the other one would wait, and then they would release theirs. They would never release things at the same time. So that's just how much they respected each other and liked each other. So
exactly that. I know Oasis did the same thing with the rivalry that they had in the '90s. There was a whole, we're going to release something on one day. Well, the other band's doing it too, so no, we're going to wait. And yeah, that happens a lot in the music industry.
Yeah, that's really cool. And the Beatles didn't have to do that.
Nope, they sure didn't. Let's do
Because they were put on a pedestal.
Let's do a nostalgic item of the week. I'm sending it to you guys now, and this is much older than we all are. But I remember seeing one of these in my my late uncle's houses when I was a kid.
Yeah. The guitar with just a couple of strings on it.
No,
wow.
no. This was an actual thing. Those are cowboy guitars. They came out in the 50s in response to the height of the cowboy. You know how popular cowboy TV shows and radio programs were. These were specifically made for them. That one is called the Wrangler. Somebody in Glasgow, here in Glasgow, Kentucky, is actually selling it for $50, which is probably a steal. But they had them all. I mean, everywhere. They had them for Gene Autry. They had them for Roy Rogers, Buck Jones. And that one's just called the Wrangler. So they had a bunch of different types and styles, but I just thought that was really neat. I saw somebody selling that, and I was like, "Ooh!"
Do you know what type of what type of material the actual guitar is? Is it kind of like a first act sounding thing? Or?
Yes, I actually do. Let's see. I have the book on my phone, and I have the page saved, but. It was actually made of real wood. It's not what made of plastic like most kid toys were. Which is the really positive thing about it.
Well, everything was made better back then.
Yeah. Let's see. I think I found it. It was. Let's see. Yeah, some of them were made from actual good wood. Others that wasn't made for like Roy Rogers or Gene Autry or any of them. The rest of them, like that one right there, was made of fiberboard. But a lot of them were made of whatever material they were using for acoustic guitars back then. They were made for the good ones. But these were.
That's awesome.
That one was made from fiberboard and sold for $5 a piece.
So basically, the nostalgic item of the week this week is an item from years and years past that you might have seen in your grandparents' house.
Exactly, and that kicks you right in the nostalgic feels right there.
Yep.
And it fits in what we were talking about, music.
It does.
You were saying, Sir Bradley?
I would like to ask, especially Mick or Tiny, whatever the hell you guys call him.
Keeps them anonymous.
Yep. And I know this is kind of a hot topic, but I would like to keep it short, though. And that's something that I brought up earlier, looking at people as more so today, but less musicians and more so entertainers.
Yep.
But I'm not talking about the people today. What I'm talking about, I might get in a lot of hot water for this. Elvis Presley.
Oh.
In my opinion,
his mom will gut you.
Now he was incredibly influential.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm not going to pretend that there was exactly a whole lot of quote unquote a musician there. He was more of a seller and entertainer.
Right.
Well, he was. However, he did write about 75% of his songs. He did write them himself. He did play the instruments on them. He was a...
Well,
to my understanding, he only knew 3 chords on a guitar.
Oh, no, that was actually...
he played piano, too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He played piano. That was just a rumor. But that rumor started coming out when he was very heavily on drugs. So... At that point, he probably did only remember how to play 3 chords. But yeah, he was very...
I'm glad Brad brought that. Sorry. I'm glad, and I should get an applause for this. I'm glad Sir Bradley brought that up.
Yeah, I
Give
am.
him a, he deserves.
Okay, here you go. Well.
Never mind, I don't need it.
There it is.
So,
it was on a delay again for some reason.
Because, we were talking Stones versus Beatles, or Beatles versus Stones is the way I would word it. But the comparison between, Michael Jackson and Prince. All right, Michael Jackson was Michael Jackson. There's no denying his star quality there.
Mm-hmm.
Michael could tell you how to shred the hell out of a guitar. He could tell you how to play a guitar.
Well, that's because his dad.
Himself.
Now his dad wanted everybody to know how every single bit of music worked.
Well, there's a great little segment in the documentary This Is It, where he is telling his guitarist how to play the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't do it himself. Prince, on the other hand, could shred the hell out of a guitar. Now, in a more, this would be a more personal topic for a lot of listeners. Elvis Presley. My dad loves Elvis Presley. All right, and my brother loves Elvis Presley. I never considered Elvis the king of rock and roll. I considered Chuck Berry the king of rock and roll. And, I mean, he even got brought up earlier by you, Matt, when you were talking about the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dad's defense is, well, it's Elvis who can sing like that, and I'm thinking, okay.
Honestly, there's probably really good reasons why Chuck Berry is not seen as the king of rock and roll, and I'm not saying they're good reasons at all, but I don't think we should touch on that this episode because that is probably a very touchy subject for a good portion of the population.
I'm not bringing up any negatives.
Yeah.
I'm bringing up a negative on Elvis. Elvis, you got to look at the time period. Elvis was white with a black voice. Chuck Berry was a better rock and roller than Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
That man had it all. He had the stage presence. He could play the hell out of a guitar. Angus Young stole his walk. His little almost sitting on the stage Marty McFly deal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and Kevin Gross. Shout out to you.
I mean, you could put up, oh my God, that you could get so many episodes out of so and so versus so and so. Like you could just go on and on and on. But at the end of the day, it's all going to be subjective because we all have our reasons, and that's the beauty of music.
Not me. I went objective. I went by numbers.
So Sir Bradley was
that was quite subjective.
So Sir Bradley was asking what my opinion kind of was on that.
Yeah.
And I kind of take the same viewpoint as he has on the Beatles to Elvis. I think originally when he started out, it was very pop music and very much he had a shtick with his dancing and whatnot that was very not okay for the time period. Whatever.
That hip shaking devil.
But I think as his career progressed, he became more of an entertainer and less of an artist. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the way you were thinking about it with the Beatles, Sir Bradley, is they didn't have to do any touring because they had their name out there so much that they were able to do that. But I don't think as much as I enjoy Elvis Presley and I do like his music, and my mother was a huge fan, so I got a lot of that influence growing up. I don't think that if he hadn't had his name out there for some other reasons, that he would have had the longevity that he had. Because some of his later music, and you can definitely tell later on in his drug years.
Oh my God, that final recorded concert was hilarious to me. But it was also sad.
Yeah.
It's just, he was phoning it in at that point, and it was just...
My dad talked about that concert a lot. He said the only song that he was on key and on point and sounded perfect was the very last song that he played, and it was My Way, which was kind of like a, he did it his way.
Yep.
Right. But yeah, we definitely could get into an entire conversation about Elvis as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel like he let the fame get to him enough that he just basically became an entertainer.
And that was America as far as Elvis goes. But the Beatles, man, before them, what was it? It was like jazz.
Yeah, it was.
One thing leads to another. And if it wasn't for the Beatles, I don't think you'd have the Rolling Stones.
Well, like I said, that's all subjective. So we're at an hour and 26. So I'm sure Sir Bradley needs to get out of here. So let's go ahead and do it.
I didn't mean for it to add another 10. I meant for it to add another 2 or 3.
Well, that's the thing. We could talk all night about this stuff.
Yeah, right. I was going to say you can't get the 4 of us together and expect anything to go 2 or 3 minutes. Because we are all kind of versed in the knowledge.
But before you sign off, Matt, what is next week?
We'll discuss that as soon as we close here, because we're supposed to have a certain subject, but this subject now may have changed that. So anyway, let's go ahead and bring this to a close. Of course, listeners, thank you for joining us this week. Thank you, Sir Bradley. Thank you, Tiny. Thank you, Alan. So audience, if you would like to give us some feedback about what you think, if there was something in there that we didn't cover tonight, let us know. Get us on social media at SOKy Nostalgia and at Deadpan Studio 18 on Facebook and Twitter. You can email us at SOKyNostalgia@gmail.com, DeadpanStudio18@gmail.com. You can go to our website, deadpan-studio.com. You can reach us there. You can also you can also listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, Spotify, as well as our server, deadpanstudio.podbean.com. Just follow that address, and you'll be good. All right, so hope everybody enjoyed Beatles versus Stones this week. We'll make an announcement about what next week will be about. So
You mean Stones versus Beatles, right?
it's always an uphill
No, he's
battle.
right.
Okay, I'll shut up. I'll shut up.
All right, for SOKy Nostalgia and Deadpan Studio Podcasts this week, I am the Matt.
Sir Bradley.
Tiny.
Alan.
And with that, good night, y'all.